You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, Episode 12. In this episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, we're talking decoy rigs. We're going to go through the different types and the benefits and the drawbacks of each, and then we're going to continue with our duck profile segment, and this week we're going to feature the Canvasback. All right, welcome to the show. This is episode 12 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We got a great show lined up for you this week. We are going to continue with our duck profile segment that we introduced to you last week. We featured the mallard last week. And this week we're going to feature another very, very popular duck, the canvasback. So really looking forward to getting into that and talking a little bit about those ducks. And then we're going to talk a little bit about decoy rigs. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you can rig your decoys and a lot of choices on the market out there. So, we're going to share some of our ideas about what we think are the best ways to rig your decoys and, some things to consider based on your hunting conditions and, all of that good stuff. So, joining me for all of the conversations here today, as always, is my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. Tuesday I was in a deer stand. The evening ended at around 60 degrees, and today I'm looking outside right now, probably 3 inches on my back deck, 3 inches of snow, and we're sitting around 30 degrees. So good little snap here. And if Saturday wasn't the last day of archery season, I would definitely be in a duck swamp because there are tons of birds showing up. So I think you're seeing the same thing down your way by the pictures you sent me today.
Yeah, I was driving home this afternoon and, we got a really big push of geese in the area for sure. And, I would just on the cuff estimate the flock of birds that I saw, maybe in the 1,500 range. I mean, there was just birds everywhere. They were just all sporadic. They had no idea where they were going. Never see birds like that in that number, throughout any other part of the season. So I knew they were new to the area. And, the pictures I sent you, I'm swerving all over the road and I'm in other lanes trying to get good pictures to show you the kind of flight we're getting. But, I figured, we were going to be getting a good push just based on the pictures that you were sending me of the snow on the ground and, the polar vortex that we were seeing all this stuff about. And, that's all great stuff for us. Our season opens, this Saturday, which will, I'll be heading down to the Potomac River and, hunting there. And, I'm going to be heading up to the Maryland Waterfowl Festival up in Eastern Maryland on the Eastern Shore, and meeting up with a couple people up there and seeing everything that's going on. And obviously they hold the World Goose Calling Championship up there. Talked about that when we had Kelly Powers on the show a little while back. So a lot of waterfowl things going on for me, this weekend. And I'm really excited to kind of get into that and get this part of my season back in swing. I haven't had any waterfowl hunting to do since the second week in October, essentially. So I'm chomping at the bit to get back. I could really care less about getting in the deer stand at this point. All I'm thinking about is flocks of birds and whistling wings. So another thing that we need to probably mention here that comes along with waterfowl hunting this time of year and the type of weather that we're seeing is the annual growth of your somewhat red beard. I don't know if that's an accurate, complete statement or not. Reddish tint, maybe. But you tend to grow it in this time of year, don't you?
Well, we are profiling the canvasback, and it has a little bit of chestnut red in it, and I'd go along with a chestnut red beard, but it's only when it gets longer. If I keep it trimmed, then it's kind of brownish. But I tell you what, my twins just turned 1, and I'm noticing quite a few more gray ones in there too. So I'm not sure how much longer I'm gonna be team Redbeard over here.
I've never heard anyone say that they have a chestnut colored beard, but I guess I can buy that.
It's definitely not. It's not my first choice. I'll tell you that.
Well, I can tell you this too. I let mine grow in pretty thick this time of year, and I got quite a few grays, and I've only got one, son running around the house to contend with. So you're not alone in the gray department, but like your chestnut colored beard, I like to think that the grays in my beard is just my distinguishment. I'm getting wiser in my old age, I guess.
Yeah, you definitely got the salt and pepper going. I think you might have a couple birds living in that nest too.
Yeah, I got to get it tamed down, but it does come in handy, kind of helping keeping the face warm, this time of year when we're getting the tough weather and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think we're alone. I think I see a lot more pictures these days of guys growing their beard in, and I think it's a lot more commonplace than it was even a handful of years ago. Come hunting season. So, Dan, this we got a lot of good feedback on the duck profile segment last week. It's kind of cool to, when we're prepping for these segments, just to look at the different species and, just the variety of choices out there that we can pick from to profile. And, we want to get into geese and, swans and cranes and cover all that kind of stuff. But when I just look at ducks, I think that's part of what makes me just love duck hunting so much is the variety of the species from bird to bird is just amazing. And, when you can go out and you have the opportunity to hunt in an area where you can shoot truly a mixed bag, where you may shoot mallards and, gadwalls and black ducks and, some widgeon or pintail. I mean, it's just awesome when I see these pictures online, Facebook people posting the mixed bag and the fall colors, quote unquote type of stuff. I just love that. I think that's just such a huge appeal to me, for waterfowl hunting, and just, you never really know what that next flock's going to have and what opportunities you might get to, shoot a duck of a lifetime.
Yeah. And you get the hybrids too, that always keep you on your toes. But like you said, there's so many different types of birds and just, different little intricate values that they have. And it takes me back to the Tim Schloss interview that we had, the podcast with him, and, that whole entire podcast and his passion about birds. I mean, it just goes back to, how special waterfowl is.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I'm really hoping to shoot a couple nice birds this year. I want to get a few added to the wall, and probably at the very top of my list, if not 1A, it's 1B. I mean, it's right there at the top of my list to get is the Canvasback, bull can for the wall, in the man cave here for my house. So why don't we go ahead and get into the profile here this week of the Canvasback.
Sure.
And Dan, before we get started, hold on here. Before we get started, you pulled a little fast one on me last week, and I want to reciprocate the opportunity here. Last week, you asked me if I knew what the oldest harvested mallard was on record, with banding data. So this week, I'll ask you, sir, do you know what the oldest harvested Canvasback on record is?
I don't know, but
do you care to venture a guess?
I'll take a guess. And that just makes me think about the whole, I'm guessing it was banded, and, just corralling canvasbacks, I'm sure, is not an easy task in itself. But let me see here. I think the mallard we said was 26 years, 4 months. I'm going to go, I'm not going to break the 30-year mark. I'm going to say 29-2.
I don't know what the exact month is, but it's definitely 29 years old per Ducks Unlimited website.
Oh.
Super lucky guess on your part. I don't know if it was a banded duck or not, but I gotta imagine that after 29 years, it'd be pretty difficult to read a banded bird, the numbers on it. A lot of these birds spend time in brackish water and that kind of stuff, and that deteriorates the bands over the time. So I don't know how they came to find out that this Canvasback was 29 years old, but per Ducks Unlimited, the Canvasback that was 29 years old is the oldest known, harvested duck. So that duck had lived the longest on record that they're aware of. So I thought that was pretty cool when talking about the Canvasback, and we'll get into a little bit of the population struggles and things that have happened with the Canvasback over the years. But before we get into that, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the canvasback in general.
Yeah, and I just want to say that's interesting. If I'd like to do a little more research to see if that was banded or not. All right, let's talk about the good old bull can here. The male, you're looking at 21 inches. The female's about 20, and the weight differential is 2.7 pounds to the female's 2.5. So really not a big difference between the male and female. The male canvasback, that it is on the federal duck stamp this year. So, if you've never seen one, just go look at your duck stamp if you're out there duck hunting. But the canvasback, as I mentioned, the chestnut red head it has and neck.
And also, if no one's never seen a male canvasback, just look at Dan's beard, and it's also similarly colored.
All right, moving on. A black breast. It has a grayish back, a blackish brown tail, and something, the belly is white, and the wing coverts are gray and vermiculated with a little bit of black. And I just love, this is one of my bucket list birds. I think they're just a beautiful bird. They just remind me of a powerhouse for some reason. And seeing all the pictures on Facebook makes me quite jealous. So moving on to the bill. The bill is blackish, and the legs and feet are a bluish gray, and that is the same for the female. A black bill and the bluish gray legs and feet. And the female has a light brown head and neck, and it goes into a darker brown chest and foreback. And then the sides and back are also a grayish brown. So definitely a beautiful bird. Not much difference in size from the male to female, and like I said, definitely on my bucket list. Speaking about breeding, the canvasbacks breed in the prairie pothole region of North America, up through Dakotas. They like to be in marshes surrounded by such vegetation as cattails, so they can be, protected. And the female averages about 10 eggs in their nest a year. So, little tidbit of info there.
Yeah, and I'm like you. The canvasback is just that majestic bird that every time I see one, I just it's one of those ones that always catches your eye. It's the type of bird that, when I'm looking out in late season in open water, I'm always scanning for canvasbacks. And, the canvasback tend to migrate, through the Mississippi Flyway to wintering grounds, into the mid-Atlantic U.S. and lower Mississippi Valley areas. Also a little bit into the, Pacific Flyway to winter, along the coast of California. Me being in Northern Virginia now, it's kind of sad that when I researched the canvasback a little bit, historically, the Chesapeake Bay would be the wintering grounds for the majority of canvasbacks. But unfortunately, due to the loss of aquatic vegetation in the bay, their range has kind of shifted south towards more of the lower Mississippi Valley area. So it's the brackish water and the marshes that the Chesapeake provided at the time, up into the channels of that are more brackish. The Chesapeake's obviously salty. It's ideal for the types of things that they like to feed on in perfect habitat. So it's really unfortunate that being locally to the Chesapeake Bay, to see that the loss of habitat has really shifted their wintering grounds. So it's unfortunate. The canvasback population is sort of in a rebound phase from lower, levels experienced kind of in the late 80s and the early 90s, due to a lot of, breeding and wintering habitat loss. And they were also, really severely impacted by lead poisoning due to, lead shot, being legal, in the past. And, that has, over time, gradually they've recovered from that, with the lead shot ban. So that's been a positive thing for, the canvasback population. In 2009, there was a population survey conducted by the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife, and that showed an increase in canvasbacks from about 488,000 to about 662,000 birds And that was following a hunting ban on canvasbacks during the 2008-2009 waterfowl season. So it got to the point where they literally shut off the canvasback, bag limit for a little while to help the population recover. The 2014 survey brought the canvasbacks in at about 685,000 birds, which is down 13% year over year from the 2013 survey, but it's still 18% up over the long-term average. So historically speaking, the canvasback is still in the rebound mode and continuing to bounce back from their lows, from as a result of habitat management loss and the lead poisoning issue. So that the canvasback is proof that the work that Ducks Unlimited and the Delta Waterfowl and Waterfowl USA and all the other organizations out there that devote their time and energy to conserving wetlands and breeding and wintering habitat, that this is a proof that with that kind of work and supporting those organizations, it can be effective and can result in more birds coming down the flyway for hunters and a better health for the population of the birds in general. So that does it. That's the canvasback. We would love to see anybody that's listening to this show. If you've got harvest pictures of canvasbacks that you've taken, please post them up to our Facebook page or our Twitter page. Send them to us at info@hpoutdoors.com. We can post them up on the page for you. We love seeing, the different birds being harvested by everyone listening to the show. So if you got some good canvasback photos out there for us, please send them in and we'll be sure to pass those along to everyone else. So, Dan, I think that, when we make our trip out to the Eastern Shore this year, I think we got a good shot with the weather that we're seeing right now for some canvasbacks to be in the area. And, maybe we'll both get that bull can that we've been searching for.
Yeah, I'm excited. We moved it back. We usually go around Christmas, and we moved it back a few weeks to mid-January. And unfortunately, we always see canvasbacks on the lakes here mid to late January after our duck season is already out. But I don't think, in recent past, I don't remember a cold snap like we had, these polar vortexes. So, we might get on them, this hunting season, with this weather that we have. So, but yeah, definitely the Eastern Shore looks promising this year, and I'm kind of jealous that you're down there getting to hunt all year. So, I think you're going to end up with a couple in your bag.
Well, I certainly hope so. And if I don't, it will not be for lack of effort. That is for certain. So, we hope you guys enjoyed the preview and the profile of the canvasback. If you would like us to profile a specific duck, shoot us an email or let us know, and we'll go ahead and bump that up on the schedule and get those out to you quicker. And let's go ahead and, as we move forward here, let's get into a little bit of decoy rigging. All right, Dan, let's talk about decoy rigging. There's a lot to get into here. There's no shortage of various ways and things to consider when you're rigging up your decoys. And I know that, we both kind of hunt similar hunting situations, but, recently my circumstances have changed a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit more until we get into that. But in general, give me something that you think is kind of important to consider when you're talking about, how you want to rig up your decoys.
Just knowing where you're hunting and the water level. I think that plays a huge part, especially if it's a river or, a swamp or whatever you hunt. You want to make sure that you have the right length of cord on your decoys. I think that's, huge.
A
main point.
Obviously, if your weight can't touch the bottom of the water that you're hunting, it's not going to do you much good. So that sort of brings me to, we're going to break this down into a couple different types of rigs to use. And we're just going to start with what we call, I guess, the standard decoy rig. This is string wrapping around the keel of your decoy and, putting a weight on it of some kind. For me, I think that standard rigging of a decoy is all around the best choice if you really don't know what you're getting into, or you're hunting various different situations and setups, because it's really one of the only things that you can use that gives you the flexibility to hunt shallow water and deep water and quicker moving water and all that kind of stuff. So it's good for all ducks. You can use it diver duck hunting, puddle duck hunting, whatever you want to do. Great for honkers, when you might need a little bit more weight, that kind of stuff. But what about you, Dan? What do you think when you're rigging up your Decoy standard? What are some things that you're considering or putting thought into when you rig up your decoys?
The standard rig, most of my older standard rigs that I have set up are actually with a braided cord, and it's fairly thin, and there's a lot of feet on it, and I usually don't like to have a ton, you probably don't need 20 foot, but I think some of the old honker decoys that I have, the floaters, probably, 12, 14 foot, just because some of the areas in the lake, I just don't always know what I'm getting into if I'm trying a new spot. So, you can wrap a lot right around the keel and tie it off on the top, and that's kind of a weird point there. But yeah, I have about 12 to 15 feet on some of my older standard rigs, but like you said, it's so adjustable. Sometimes it takes longer to set up, but that's just, if you don't know where you're going, it's a perfect rig to have. You don't want to go out with 5 or 6 feet of cord and have your decoys float away on you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what you're saying. Where I'm hunting now, though, down here, all of my decoys that I have rigged in quote unquote standard style have a minimum of 20 feet, because when I'm hunting the Potomac River, there's blinds on the river that I hunt where I'm hunting in 2 to 3 feet of water, and then there's times when I'm hunting into 12 to 17 feet of water. So there's a lot of different things to consider there. Obviously, depth is one, tide is another. I may start hunting in an area that when I drop my decoys in the morning, it's 10 feet. And by 10 o'clock in the mid morning, it's risen 3 to 4 feet. So that's something that I have to take into consideration. Another thing that I have to consider too is, the current, is the wind blowing in and out? Is that going to affect all that kind of stuff? So if the wind and the current is a little bit stronger, I'll let out even more decoy cord, just to give the decoy a better angle of draw on the weight. So it's not, it's got more resistance to the ground, similar like you would if you were anchoring a boat type of thing. So the more cord you let out, the greater holding power that you might have. So I like having the flexibility, to do that. I've had some in the past with the braided line, like you've mentioned. I've really tried to change over everything to the the PVC type cord, the rubbery cord type stuff. I like that for a couple different reasons. One, I don't worry about it getting dry rotted as much and potentially breaking. Two, I don't have to tie knots on it. I can just crimp it with pliers and the little metal crimps or aluminum crimps that you can buy. I like that option versus tying knots that could give out or fray and all that kind of stuff. I feel a little bit better with the PVC cord. You always have the opportunity to put depth adjusters on the line to help you adjust for depth, but I tend to just kind of wrap it twice around the end of the keel, and it holds the depth just fine. So, for me, that tends to be how I do mine. But again,
let me ask you, what kind of anchors do you use on those?
My preferred, I've got a bunch of different kinds. So the different kinds that I'll use are pretty much the standard old strap, that you can kind of bend and wrap around. And I also use the keel grabbers, with the rubber cord and then the J-hook type weight that you can hook onto the keel. The keel grabbers are what I prefer. They're really nice. You wrap them up tight around the keel, you clip them right on there. Makes for a really nice, clean setup. Really, really good. I just have a bunch of the straps. So I do use those, but I tend to use those more on like my honker decoys and stuff where I can, bend them around the neck, and because they don't always stay on the keel so much. So I tend to put them around the neck and that kind of thing. But again, I prefer the keel grabbers. I'll use a variety of different weights, depending on what I'm going with. But uh, I can't imagine that for what your applications are, Dan, you're using much more than a 4 to 6 ounce weight on most of your decoys. Is that right?
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, we're not in Potomac rivers, and just a point that I wanted to throw out there: if you are making your own rigging system, if you do use a lead strap, make sure that a lot of guys, if they have flocked heads, they don't want to use a lead strap. So something to think about before you go out and purchase things, just because you don't want it, during transportation, you don't want that rubbing all the flocking off of your decoys. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I have flocked heads on mine. I wrap it right around there. We use Higdon decoys. They seem to have been holding up pretty good so far. I don't really worry about flocking on my water decoys so much, just because they're floating on a big sheet of glaring water anyway.
Right.
But
right.
Definitely if you're sensitive to your gear, or you've noticed that the flocking isn't holding up well, and you don't want to reflock in the off season. Obviously, you don't want to be wrapping straps around the neck, the neck of your honker decoys. But in general, for smaller decoys, calm water, that kind of thing, 4 to 6 ounces of lead should do fine. Whether you're doing a keel grabber, weight, strap, or you mold your own and you pour your own, that kind of thing. 4 to 6 ounces should be plenty. For most of the stuff that I'm using, I'm in the 8 to 12 range. I've got some of the Higdon oversized battleship, canvasbacks and bufflehead decoys and stuff like that. And they're almost the size of a lesser goose, practically. They're huge. And, I run 7.5 ounce keel grabber weights on those. My honkers, I like to run a minimum of 12 ounces just because, I never know what I'm running with wind and current and tide and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely don't want to have to chase decoys around. And when you get on that open water and you're hunting Potomac River or Lake Erie or something like that, if the wind picks up and you got chop and the water's bouncing, you want your decoys to hold on good. So make sure you use enough weight. So we've touched on some of these things, Dan, but let's go ahead and just run through a short little comprehensive list. Give me a couple of the benefits of using standard decoy rigs, and then I'll give you some of the drawbacks.
Well, like we said, they're just very versatile. You can go from 3 foot, and your situations to 17, 18 foot. And I think that right there, it's an all round rig. So, there's just so many options with a standard rig that it pretty much covers all your bases. And I think, it's pretty much, there's a lot of positive there.
Yeah, it's the tried and true method, they've been doing it this way for years, and, it still works today. A couple of things that I want to point out. When you decide how you want to rig your decoys, not only do you need to consider the conditions that you're going to hunt, but you need to think about how you're going to take your decoys to and from the field every day. If you want to, throw your duck decoys, you got a dozen or 2 dozen mallard decoys that you want to throw in a mesh bag, you're probably going to want to have keel grabber weights or something like that. So it's all nice and tight and you don't have weights coming undone and things getting tangled in the bag, that kind of stuff. If you're using slotted decoy bags, that may be a little bit different story. But if you're going to put them in mesh bags, I would definitely make sure that you got all the cord buttoned up and, tucked onto the keel in a good tight way so that you're not spending an hour in the morning, cutting decoy wire because you couldn't get it untangled and that kind of stuff. Some of the drawbacks, for the standard decoy rig, and we sort of touched on this, but it can take a long time to get set up. Not only undoing every decoy and setting the right amount of cord and pitching them all out in the morning, and then picking them all up and winding them and putting them on the keel, but just tying off all the knots or crimping all the the crimps and cutting off all the cord and just the setup up front. That can be a timely process, and not a lot of guys have that time to put into that. So something to consider. And another thing for me too is the keel grabbers are great. I really do love them. But I remember, Dan, last year when we were hunting, and the infamous day was like 0 degrees, and you had a left wader boot full of water, and all that kind of stuff. We've talked about that several times in the show. But I remember when we were picking up, it was so cold. I wrapped a keel grabber weight around the keel of my decoy, and the rubber piece just snapped because it was so cold and just so fragile from the weather. So that can be a drawback and something you got to be careful of when when you're using those in really, really frigid temperatures.
Yeah, and there's like an elastic on that, correct? Like,
yeah, it's like a rubber piece that, ties onto your decoy cord, and then the other end holds the lead weight. So it's just a stretchy portion so that you don't have to be real fine with your decoy cord. You can stretch it, one way or the other so that it hooks around to the closest edge of the keel on the decoy so that it holds nice and tight.
Right. Yeah, you definitely don't want things breaking off. And that was a cold day, and we have pictures of our decoys with halos of ice around them. So yeah, that was some rough weather, and unfortunately things do break. So, but something to think about.
Yeah, and another thing too, last thing we'll talk about with the standard rigs is price. I mean, this stuff can get expensive. When you got to buy straps for every decoy that you got and cord, and you're putting 20 feet on like I do, that stuff can get pricey. So, if you don't need all of that, I wouldn't recommend doing it. Obviously, you're just kind of wasting your money. But if you think, or that there's going to be opportunities throughout the season where you're going to need that flexibility that the standard rig can provide you, then it's probably worth looking into. But it's definitely not cheap to go, buying keel grabbers and crimps and cord and all that kind of stuff for every decoy that you got. So just another thing to consider. All right, let's talk about another different style that you can use. And that's going to be, what we call the Texas rig. A couple different names for it, I guess. But tell me about the Texas rig, Dan. What do you think?
It's a very quick setup. It's very easy to use. It's pretty much... most are about 3 foot. It's a tangle-free cord. It attaches to the the decoy with a clip, and it usually has a sliding sinker on it. So, pickup is real quick. You can put a carabiner around the bottom loop of all of them and be on your merry way. So it's a really quick rig. Majority of my decoys are on a Texas rig because most of the time I don't need more than 36 inches where I'm at, but I do have a few that are in the 48 to 60 range just for some lake hunting. But Texas rig is, like I said, it's very quick, very easy, and for someone like myself, I do a lot of hunts before I go into the office in the morning, and the standard rig we were saying, it takes a while to pick up, and the Texas rig is just money for me when it comes down to the time. So it's something that I use pretty much every time.
Yeah, the Texas rig really thrives in sort of the puddle duck hunter's arsenal, hunting in the knee deep type waters and that kind of stuff. When you talk about quick, I mean, you can go out there with a dozen mallard decoys all on Texas rigs, take that carabiner off the end, and you could literally swing the entire dozen of decoys out into your water and just let it go. And with one swing, your decoys are set. You're not setting individual decoys. I mean, you just pitch the whole thing and it's out. And then you go back through when it's time to pick up. You just grab that cord, clip it onto the carabiner, and you just keep going. And a lot of guys don't even bag those. It's just easier to just throw them over your shoulder and roll out. And you throw them in the bed of your truck. You get home, you put them on a hook in the garage, and they hang there. They're organized. It's easy. It's great. They're pretty cost effective. I mean, you're going to spend maybe $30, $35 for 36 inches of cord, probably like a 4-ounce weight, roughly, something like that. But the weights do vary. You can get more weight if you need it, or various lengths, or we use Backwood decoy systems, and they offer an extension, so you can get a piece of extension cord to hook onto your decoy if you're going to be in some deeper water, or you might have a tide situation like I do when I run my BDS rigs on my puddle duck setup. I use the extensions because the tides can shift a good bit where I'm at, like we've mentioned. So, they're pretty versatile within that, within the scope of what they're designed to do. No one can argue with their speed for sure. So it's one of the bigger innovations that have kind of hit the waterfowl, rigging market over the last several years. And, they're incredibly popular. I mean, you see a lot of different companies doing it, and, you can't open a DU magazine or something like that without seeing, ducks hanging on a rig, Texas rig type thing. So definitely a lot of positives to go into Texas rigs, but in your opinion, Dan, what are some of the drawbacks that come with the Texas rig?
Just, the negatives of the Texas rig are the positives of the standard rig. Just being able to adjust to your water levels. And, I couldn't see you down there with Texas rigs with tide and, and rivers. Even though, companies have the extensions on there, I don't want to have to carry out extensions when I'm going. So, the Texas rig it's not that versatile. If you know where you're going, if you know you're just in a pond or in a puddle and hunting mallards or whatnot, it's very good. But if you're hunting somewhere with tide and you might end up chasing your decoys around, and that's not good.
Yeah, I for sure. I mean, you have to know where you're going to hunt. We've already covered that for sure. Some of the things that I've experienced with the Texas rig, this early season, I'd throw a dozen mallards into my canoe, and I'd get out to my blind where I wanted to set up, and I'm trying to get decoys out, and the string's hooked on my stool that I'm trying to get, and it's hooked around my gun case and that kind of stuff. So I think that they can be super efficient, but they can also be a pain sometimes if, depending on your setup, they can tangle a little bit. You got to untangle wires a little bit. They're not really set up to be on, stored in mesh bags and that kind of stuff. It's usually just going to give you more of a headache. The BDS rigs that we use, I like, has a split ring setup. So, you just thread the ring right onto the keel and it's done. Some other rigs, have a small clip, which is good. But, some of the holes in the keels of the decoys just aren't real large. And those clips can get tough to get in there on sometimes, that I've noticed. And then I worry about them in really cold water breaking. I just don't like moving parts too much. So those are kind of, cautious things that, fears that I have that you could run into with that sort of stuff. Another thing you kind of got to take into consideration too is if you're going to use these Texas rigs and you're not going to bag your decoys, and you're going to throw them over your shoulder, or you're going to have them in your truck, that's going to take its toll on your decoys. They're going to get more banged up. You might chip off more paint. I've got the rhino lining type stuff in the bed of my truck. If I throw my mallards back there and they rattle around, I mean, they're going to get banged up. That stuff's going to tear them up a little bit. So, I think those are some of the things to consider when you're looking to do a Texas rig. But if I know that I'm going to hunt puddle ducks in 2 to 3 foot of water, I'm going to use Texas rigs 10 out of 10 times, for a setup like that. So I think it's all just kind of knowing, what you want out of your setup and what you can expect when you're going hunting. Yep.
I can't disagree with that.
All right. So let's go ahead and talk about the last setup option that we're going to cover. And I know that this is one that you're going to be able to provide a ton of insight on. And quite frankly, it's been a really big learning curve for me this year as I've prepped for hunting divers and diver spreads. And that's, rigging up long lines and using like a gang rig type of style. So having never worked with one, Dan, what would be some of your, questions and concerns and things about, rigging up a long line?
Well, my first question is, the guys that hunt big water, they're out on bays and, out in, off the shore. My biggest question is when they rig them up is just how, the initial anchor that goes out. How do you know how deep it is? I don't know if they have, a depth finder to start it out. And then I know that there are some rigs that have, sliders on it that attach to the main line, and maybe they just let it slide down. I'm not real sure. I've never used them, like I said, but some guys that tie the knots to have a separate line for each decoy, it just seems like it could get a little bit tricky.
So here's where I stand with what you're just saying. Before you know anything about the depth of the water, I mean, you have to consider how many decoys you want to run on your line and how tight you want them to be. So if you want to run a dozen bluebills on your line, you need to consider, do I need a 60-foot line? Do I want a 90-foot line? Do I want a 140-foot line? That's just the line that's going to essentially be on the surface of the water that your decoys are going to clip to. Now, if you're hunting in 5, 10, 15 foot of water, that kind of thing, you can probably secure your line, your main line to an anchor drop it down in the water. When it hits the bottom, start clipping your decoys right there on the water, and then just leave enough room on the other end to drop your anchor. But what a lot of guys will do is they'll have extensions. So if they're hunting in 20 to 25 feet of water, they may have a 30-foot decoy or anchor line extension that they'll clip onto the end of their main line. So their main line, if it's a 90-foot line, all of that 90 foot will be up on the surface, essentially holding decoys that are clipped onto there. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
So with the main line, though, you have to consider how you're going to use it and how you're going to store it. So the two options are essentially clipping your decoys with the dropper rig, which are typically 18 to 36 inches long, and you clip them directly to the main line. And you can either take them on and off every time you hunt, or you can clip them to the main line, leave them on the main line, and store them in that fashion. If you're going to do that, you want to make sure you have a thick enough cord, probably minimum of 1/4 inch, but the thicker the better. Definitely want it to be like a tarred, braided type of line, something that's going to sink, something that's going to stand up to, being in the water constantly. You'll read online about guys using paracord. I would definitely not recommend using paracord. Having made a few lanyards and stuff like that, that stuff can tangle in a heartbeat. So I think if you're using paracord, it may work, but it just seems like it's a risky business for me. I don't want to be undoing knots at 0 dark 30 in the morning. So for me this year, I'm going to probably clip and remove the decoys every time I hunt. So I've got a 1/4 inch rope that I'm going to basically pull in and out of the water with an electrical cord reel that I bought from Home Depot, like a $5 one. So I'm going to basically store the line on that. And then, I considered the type of bags I wanted to use, and, you can buy slotted bags, and, cause every decoy has like I said, an 18 or to 36 inch rope tied to it with a clip on the end of it that you clip to the main line. So, you can store them in slotted bags, and, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. But for me, after doing some research, I ended up buying the Yard collapsible leaf bags that you can buy at like Home Depot or Lowe's and that kind of thing, where, you would use it to pick up leaves or yard clippings and take them and throw them away. These bags are $15 a piece. They're durable. They got drainage holes in the bottom. They've got handles. They collapse down to about 4 inches high, and they have a buckle on each side, so they can stow away when you got all your decoys deployed. Just a really nice, cost-effective way. I can fit I think I've got about 30 diver decoys, the Higdon foam filled in my leaf bag that I bought from Home Depot, the Ryobi brand or whatever. It seems to work really well. I haven't had any issues with tangles. I know a lot of guys from what I've seen online will actually put the decoys on the main line in those types of bags. And I guess the key to that is, when you deploy your decoys, you want to actually pull it by the main line, and you'll never have a tangle. It's when you start grabbing decoys and throwing them out is when it starts to tangle. So as long as you grab the main line and just let the decoys kind of do their thing, you're not going to have any tangles. But I'm not going to go that route because I hunt out of a canoe a lot, and I don't want to have all of that going on. I think it'll just be easier for me to clip and unclip. But one of my biggest concerns when I started looking into these was, the clips, how do they stay on the line? Do they slide around? And, how do you keep the decoys from bunching up and that kind of thing? And from what I've found, a 1/4 inch rope, when you put these decoy clips on there, it holds it tight. So, there's no sliding around. They clip right onto the line. So you don't have to tie knots on either side to keep them from slipping and that kind of stuff. You just clip it right on there, and it holds tight. I've used the Doctari, or I'm not sure if that's the proper pronunciation, but that's where I've got my long lines, my clips through. And so far I've been really happy with, their upgraded thicker rope in the clips. So those are the big things that I considered when I was purchasing my long lines. And, for anchors, you can buy, little, several pound small anchors to pitch out and that kind of thing. Some guys will use old window weights and stuff like that. So you can get it from a junkyard. For me, I went to like Dick's and bought 5-pound dumbbells and, tied a rope to them with a carabiner. So I'll just grab the dumbbell, clip the carabiner to my main line, and pitch it over the side. Like I said, I hunt water, no deeper than, 15 to 17 feet. So I'm going to clip them right to the main line with no anchor extensions. Anybody that's hunting from the shore, that's not out in big open water, I think, you're probably good to go in that regard. So what do you think, Dan? What do you think some of the biggest benefits of hunting with that style would be?
I mean, it seems fairly easy as long as, you don't get tangled up, and, it seems versatile. You can put as many decoys out as you want. Like you mentioned, I don't diver hunt much, and I know that, you do, so I wouldn't know as far as if you mix your decoys, different species or anything like that, but, it works, and it definitely, I'm excited to see some of your video of killing some divers this year.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the biggest benefits of long lines, a lot of people want to say, well, it's not real natural looking. And, I don't see, ducks just swimming in single file all over the place, but you got to kind of consider from the bird's point of view, what they're seeing when they're looking at long line setup. So, divers typically fly really close to the water. Okay. So when you're looking at a bunch of decoy lines set up and you're flying on the water level from afar, that's going to look like a group of rafting ducks, like a sea duck or diver ducks do. They raft up in bigger groups. That's what that's going to look like. You'd have to get up in the air and fly over top of the lines at a decent altitude to see that they're not, rafted, that they're lined. So they don't have that depth perception quite, at that angle to the water. So it gives that rafting perception. Also, those lines will act as runways where, with set into the wind properly with the proper pocket at the end of the line, divers will fly right up that line, right into your hole. So it's a really cool setup. It's easy. It's quick, especially if you got two guys, one guy's running the line, the other one's clipping decoys. Super easy. You can group different species on a single cord. Bluebills, redheads, ringnecks, some canvasbacks, that kind of stuff you can probably mix in okay. Your golden eyes and your buffleheads, you probably want to keep them to the side on their own lines, or maybe, in my case, I just individually rig those the standard style, because those ducks tend to decoy to their own species. So, you set those kind of to the side and, just keep them on the side on their own, and you'll work the ducks to the appropriate sides of the line, playing the wind appropriately and everything else. So, I think it's a really good, fun way to do it. Some of the drawbacks are the things that you sort of mentioned. If you're not careful, it can get tangled. Some of the things you can do to prevent that is use a thick enough line and keep a reel, keep the stuff under control. If you're not putting your stuff in slotted bags like me, I put them in the leaf bags. I expect my decoys to take a little bit more of a beating. But, that kind of goes to the point where invest in quality decoys, or, expect to, repaint your decoys every couple of years. I know a lot of guys, they buy mallard decoys, beat them up for a year or two, and then they paint them, and those become their diver decoys, and they paint those every 2 years, and they turn them into, redheads and, ringnecks and that kind of stuff. A lot of guys do that. A lot of guys will buy cheap mallards because they know that they're going to get beat up, and then they just, paint them and that kind of stuff. Lines can get pricey. I'm not going to lie that they're not cheap, but the way I look at it is if you get a quality one, it should be a lifetime investment, and, you shouldn't have to buy them multiple times, and you can run a lot of decoys on one or two lines. You obviously need to know what kind of water depth you're going to be dealing with. If it's too deep, you got to have the extensions. And, if you're hunting by yourself, it can be challenging to set that, set the decoy spread in the dark by yourself, making sure you got your lines, appropriately set to your blind and the wind and all that kind of stuff. So that can be a handful, but, for the most part, nothing but good things to say about, hunting with long lines, and, looking forward to really using them this year on the Potomac River, and hopefully getting some of those canvasbacks we had talked about.
Yeah, I'm just thinking on this end that I couldn't imagine setting out all those diver decoys with a standard rig. That would take forever.
And you read stories online about guys doing it. There's no right or wrong way, but there certainly seems like there's ways that can be more efficient than others. So I'll just leave it at that. But not everybody believes that the longer line, is the way to go about it. And hey, if you got ducks working you, it's all the same. You know what I mean? And, there's some things you have to consider when you're setting long lines as far as, how far away from your blind or your spot that you're going to set the end of your line and all that kind of stuff. But that's probably a discussion for another day. When we're talking about maybe targeting a diver duck and, some tips and techniques about hunting divers. So we'll get into that a little bit more, on another day. But, there's one thing that I was kind of hoping that you would, elaborate a little bit on. And this is what I would call sort of our other section rigging, other things outside of the standard. And I'd like to hear you discuss this because, in Pennsylvania, you can't use powered decoys, as we've mentioned on the show a couple different times. So, you guys up there live and die by the jerk string and, some other unconventional methods that you've developed to implement motion into your spread. So, talk with me a little bit about that, Dan, and share with us some of the stuff you guys do with your jerk rigs and some of those other things.
Yeah, and I'd actually like to do some investigating to see if there are other states that are not allowed to use motion.
There are.
Yeah, I think Casey mentioned that. At
least a portion of the season out there that you can't use them. I know there's several other states. I don't want to take a guess at what they are, but I believe there's a couple on the West Coast, like California, out that way, and I think there are a handful of other ones that you're not allowed to use powered decoys.
All right, so let's talk about it. A jerk rig, and there's many ways to do this. I actually started with just actually hooking up one decoy to a string, and you have birds working, and you just pull that one. I have it at the other end on a Texas rig in the ponds that I usually hunt. Like that's plenty of weight on it. And you pull it just to get enough splashing, just to get some motion in the decoys. Recently, I made a rig, and I was watching online, and you see all these new inventions and whatnot. I took apart an old ground blind that I had for hunting deer, and the poles on the side. There's a centerpiece that holds all the poles together. So pretty much what I did was I drilled through the middle of that. I put an eye bolt through it and attached that to a cord, and I drilled through the ends of each cord. So it's pretty much like a cross. There's four poles going out. Put maybe 12 inches of line down through that hole. So now I have a 4 decoy rig that I can pull. And then on the other end of that, I actually have, it's probably about a 7-foot pole that I drilled a hole through that and put an eye bolt. And I have, it's just shock cord. It's the same thing that goes into tent poles. And I attach that to a carabiner, attach that to the eye bolt on the centerpiece of the 4 of my rig. And you pull that, and then it pulls it right back. So that was a very, the ground blind was old and very discolored, so it was nothing for me to rip it apart and start messing around. But it was very cheap, and it just adds a ton of motion. You have 4 birds out in the water moving around, and they're not in a straight line. On the other hand, what I did also, I bought a jerk rig from Rig'em Right, and pretty much it is a miniature gang rig. It has a weight at the end with the same shock cord, so it's very springy. And then it probably has about 8 feet of the shock cord on it, and then it turns into just a regular cord. It's a threaded cord, which I was kind of surprised at, and I hope that there isn't much play. I actually just bought this, so I haven't used it yet. And there's room to tie off about 4 or 5 decoys on it, so that'll be in a straight line. But anything that we can do to add motion is to our benefit here, where we can't use a motorized decoy.
So let me ask you a question about this, because as I'm sitting here listening to you, I understand the value of ripple in the water and some motion and all that kind of stuff, but I almost think that, if that's all that it's being used for, it's sort of underutilizing maybe the ability of that, because, for me, like I'm thinking, what does a duck that would make that kind of motion on the water, what's it doing? And, I think that, if a group of 2 or 3 ducks were landing on the water, it would probably look very similar to if you gave the string a good, one good tug while there's birds, circling your hole. They might see that bigger splash, not just the ripple, but that big splash, and say, oh, 3 ducks just lit right there in that hole, must be safe. You know what I mean?
Right.
Have you ever thought about that, or am I off the reservation there?
No, I think you're on. And, there's just been so many days in the past that there's absolutely no wind, or, you're hunting a beaver pond that's surrounded by pine trees, and there's no ripple and, any kind of motion. Even talking with Casey before, sometimes he'll be in the water and just kicks his feet just to get ripples. So, there's motion, and, moving decoys is just key to success.
Yeah, and I guess however you go about getting it, getting that motion and that movement, with whatever's within the legal means of your state, by all means, give it a go. I had one more little setup that I wanted to talk about really briefly, but anything else about your jerk rig setup or anything like that you wanted to cover?
I think I about covered it. There's just so many do-it-yourself ways, and if anyone else out there has a different way to make it, give us a shout. Let us know how you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always looking for new and innovative techniques, and that's one thing I love about hunting in general. But the type of people that typically hunt, are the type of people that if they're trying to get something done and there's not a product on the market that that can accomplish it, they're not afraid to sort of engineer it up themselves and rig up a way to make that happen. So if you've got a setup that you're using that we haven't talked about, by all means send it over, and we'd love to share that with our listeners. The last setup that I wanted to just touch on briefly, and I've never used this setup, but I've seen it online, so I know guys are using it, and I don't really have a good name for it. I'll just call it the bait net setup. And essentially what it is, guys hunting, divers typically out in bigger open water, they'll secure a bunch of decoys to a bait net, essentially. So, whether it's a zip tie or whatever it is, they may use 2 or 3 dozen decoys, coots or something like that, where they're using for like a confidence spread type of situation, and then they'll throw that net out into the water, and when the net sinks and the decoys float, it just looks like a pack of rafting ducks, like diver ducks do. Kind of, we were talking about the long lines, but this is all one shot, toss it over the side of your boat, and boom, they're there. I think that's a great way to get confidence and show rafts of ducks floating around your setup. Again, I've never used it. I don't know how difficult it would be to work with tangles and all that kind of stuff, but I got to imagine it would require a little bit more room in your boat probably than what my canoe would offer. But I've seen plenty of guys doing it and posting online about it. So if you think that could be something that could help your situation, definitely don't be afraid to give that a go. And the one thing I would say about all of these setups that we're talking about is try it out before season. You don't want to try the first time that you deploy a long line to be at 4:30 in the morning on the opening day of the season, when or later, and when the divers move in and it's cold and you're working with decoy gloves and you're in the dark and there's wind and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you're comfortable with being able to get your decoys in and out efficiently and effectively before you actually put it into play out there in the field. So as we mentioned, if you've got a setup or a tip or suggestion that we didn't mention, please shoot us a Facebook message or an email at info@hpoutdoors.com, or even better yet, give us a call on the HP Outdoors hotline at 724-609-FOWL, 724-609-3695, and we'll play your tip on the air for everyone to hear, and share the good information with everybody else. So Dan, I think we covered it pretty well, though. I think we hit all the highlights and all of the major things that, guys are probably using out there in the field. And, I think this is a good reference for everybody who maybe they bought their first dozen decoys this year and they're, trying to figure out what they got to do when they rig them up. So, hopefully we helped a few people out there, with this segment here today.
Yeah, there's definitely some good information that we gave them. Just another tip, and this is something that is on the BDS rigs. They use a monofilament line, and so pretty much a very heavy fishing line. Some guys use from 80 to 200 pound tests. So, that's something that if you're in saltwater or brackish water, you don't have to worry about it, breaking off or getting weak at that pound test. So, that I've seen electrical wire used, and really most of the decoy cord isn't that expensive. So, there's, many ways to build a rig.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And, like we said, whatever you have at your disposal to use, there's no right or wrong way as long as it gets the job done. So I think we had a good discussion about rigging up decoys, and I think this is a good spot to go ahead and put a bow on that. So let's go ahead and transition into the next segment here on the show. Well, Dan, I enjoyed the discussion on decoy rigs, and I've enjoyed profiling the Canvasback, and I've become very fond of the parting shot segment of the show because it's a part of the show that we get to use outside of duck hunting necessarily, and just kind of things that are on our mind, and things that have impacted us and all that kind of stuff. So I know that we put a lot of discussion into what we're going to use for the parting shot every episode. And, I think that, this week's parting shot is going to be no different than some of the ones that we've had in the past. But I think we'll go ahead and just and transition into that section. What do you say?
That sounds good. I think you have big shoes to fill after the Veterans Day one. I mean, that was about perfect. So have at it, my friend.
Well, as much as I enjoy supporting our armed forces and giving them thanks, it saddens me to see the support that they get, at the levels that they get on these holidays. It saddens me that they don't receive that kind of support every single day, because they certainly deserve it. But I know that they're absolutely appreciative of the thanks that they do receive on Veterans Day and Memorial Day and things of that nature. But, continue to support our veterans, extend a hand when needed, open a spot when you're hunting blind when you have the opportunity, and to continue to support the men and women that have served this country when they come home. So let's go ahead and we'll transition now into this week's parting shot. So this week's parting shot talks about something that we joked about earlier in the episode, and Dan and I kidded each other about growing beards and all that kind of stuff. And November is a great time for that as the hunting season rolls on. But November is also No Shave November. A lot of people talk about that, and you see beards and mustaches popping up everywhere. But what that actually is it's a nonprofit organization that's devoted to growing cancer awareness, funding prevention, researching, educating, and basically, supporting all the causes that fight cancer and those that fight the battle against cancer. They really partner with the American Cancer Society to just raise awareness. They embrace hair because that's something that every cancer patient loses when they go through treatment. So they encourage everybody to embrace hair in the month of November. Let your hair grow, let your beard, your mustache grow, and take the money that you would use for that manicure or that grooming, take that money and donate it to cancer research. So check them out at www.noshave.org and use it on Twitter, #LetItGrow. Well, Dan, before we wrap up the show, I just wanted to take a minute and wish you the best of luck on the final day of the archery season in Pennsylvania. I know you've been putting time in on the stand, and you've been scouting a lot, and I know that you've got some bucks patterned. You know, your dad connected on a nice buck last weekend, so I know you're itching to fill that tag, but I assure you, your duck blind and your duck decoys miss you, and Kimber wants to get out and she wants to do some retrieving. So hurry back. I know your waterfowl friends miss you.
Thank you very much. And I'm biting at the bit. I want to get out duck hunting this weekend, but I've had 2 really nice last day archery bucks in the last 4 years. So I'm crossing my fingers, and I'm pumped to get back in the swamp and in the cut corn around here that's just holding tons of birds. So I'm ready to go. It's that time of the year. Tis the season, and to everyone out there listening, good luck to you as well, and be safe.
You know, you do have a history of shooting nice bucks in the last day archery season. I forgot all about that. So,
my wife says that I pass them all during the season, and then when it comes crunch time, I have to shoot one. So she thinks I just go out and waste time in a stand to be away from her or something. I don't know, but that's definitely not the case. But I can see her point in that. Yeah, well, regardless of your reasonings for it, you've had a successful last day, a couple different times, and hopefully you have another one. And as you mentioned, we hope everybody out there that's, wrapping up their archery season, the weather's right. We're seeing a lot of big bucks getting taken on Facebook and stuff like that. So if you're still chasing the big one, best of luck to you. Stay safe. And we'll go ahead and close out the show. So that's going to do it here for episode 12 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed the Canvasback profile and our discussion on decoy rigs. As always, we look forward to your feedback. You can check out all our past episodes on iTunes, and if you haven't had the opportunity, please feel free to give us a rating and a review. That helps us out immensely, and we certainly appreciate it. Thank you to all that listen. This is the time of year that we all wait for so patiently. So enjoy it, be safe, and for Dan and I, till next time, take care.